We have Dr. V.S. Seshadri, who is an advisor at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries. Dr. Seshadri was formerly, till recently, India's ambassador to Myanmar, and as a member of the Foreign Service, Indian Foreign Service, he has served in various capitals including Nairobi, Tehran, Brussels, Bangkok, Washington DC, and Yangon. He has served as Joint Secretary WTO while on deputation to the Ministry of Commerce. He has also served as Minister Commerce in Embassy of India, Washington DC, Joint Secretary in charge of WTO matters, etc. In fact, he'll talk about over the next 10 minutes is emerging international trade rules on e-commerce, because this is one of the very important topics when we're discussing about digital economy. We kind of forget that there's so many cross-border arrangements that needs to be put in place before we actually get into the next one, where we're talking about development and we're talking about the 85% and the bottom and all those things. So we thought that it would be very useful if he would share his experience on these international trade flows, especially with respect to e-commerce, and then we will move over to the next session. Dr. Seshadri, please.
Thank you very much. In fact, I would like to thank IIIT-Bangalore and Professor Sadagopan. We got to know each other when we were doing something in Myanmar, setting up the Myanmar Institute of Information Technology in Mandalay, which is a collaborative venture between IIIT-Bangalore and the Myanmar government. Now, what I would like to share with you, of course, it's a world apart from the earlier topic where we were discussing how IT tools can be employed to deal with very, very social policy issues or day-to-day issues. I'm particularly referring here to emerging world trade rules in the subject of e-commerce. Now, I would be specifically talking about what has happened in the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement that was signed in February this year and is in the process of getting ratification in the US Congress. Of course, we are not sure because the presidential candidates are opposing TPP, but very likely, as it all happens elsewhere, once the electoral rhetoric dies down and the elections take place, they may well reverse their earlier stand because TPP, as far as we can see, greatly favors America. And in fact, it was negotiated during the last 6 years with US leadership. Of course, India is not a member of TPP, but if it comes to force, and it may come into force during the time where many of the youngsters here will be actively working, it will have a major impact on world's rule wide. So presently it has 12 members, including US, Japan, Australia, Canada, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, and 6 other countries. They are in the Asia-Pacific region. They account for a sizable share of the world GDP and world trade. In the services trade itself, they account for over a quarter of world trade. Now, before I proceed, I have to say a few words. I am no expert on IT matters. You can see that I can still rely on paper and not use a computer for presentation. But as a former diplomat with some experience in dealing with trade rules, what I thought was to use this opportunity of assembled experts. The lady talked about how it is important for disciplines to talk to each other and collaborate, and it's very, very important that people who deal with trade rules collaborate very closely with the actual user industry and see how the rules that will come up in due course will help our industry. Now, the e-commerce chapter of TPP is a separate chapter, and it's the first time that a regional trade agreement has a separate chapter on e-commerce. Is basically aimed at having an open internet and seeks to facilitate e-commerce. Number one, it prohibits customs duties on electronics transmissions including content transmitted electronically. This is already in vogue, so it's not something new. India has also agreed to this. Of course, every WTO ministerial meeting, it gets adopted till the next WTO ministerial, but it's already in vogue, it's nothing new. But secondly, it requires all TPP members to allow cross-border movement on data, except where the member places a restriction for a legitimate public policy objective. Now, such free movement of data will also cover personal information if it is for the conduct of such business persons. The chapter also prohibits requiring localization of computing and storage facilities, that is internet servers, etc. You cannot ask companies to locate within your country for conducting business, except again for a public policy objective. For example, the relevant rule is fairly strong, and it says as follows: no party shall require a covered person to use or locate computing facilities in that party's territory as a condition for conducting business in that territory. It's a strong wording. It provides for net neutrality of a certain type, in that it will not exclude those internet service suppliers that offer its subscribers certain content on an exclusive basis. Now that we have a debate, you will be aware what this really means. Also prohibited is recognizing the transfer or access to software code in any software or products containing the software as a condition for market access. So this is another condition. Now, many analysts have looked at these provisions that are carried in the e-commerce chapter, and they feel that this is one of the most transformative elements of the TPP, that they could shape the development of the digital economy for years to come. My understanding is that the rules and a clear understanding of the pros and cons are still evolving, even within India. Of course, we have a provision in the information technology rules published by the Ministry of Information Communications Technology in April 2011 that requires 3 conditions to be met before the transfer of sensitive personal data or information by a body corporate to any other person or entity outside India. 1, ensuring that the latter have the same level of protection as the India-based body corporate, that the transfer of data is necessary for the performance of a contract between the body corporate and the provider of information, and when the data provider has consented to the transfer. Now, there were also reports in newspapers about a proposal of the India's National Security Council for making it mandatory for all email service providers, including foreign ones, to mandatorily set up local servers and host the content belonging to internet users in India. This has not come about. There was a proposal floated around. The paper has also reportedly talked about the need for government to establish an Indian email service. Some of the other countries have, like China, like Korea, Japan, etc., that would compete in terms of technical quality and sophistication with foreign players. Now, we also have the case of the BlackBerry, the RIM, which was persuaded to set up servers in India in 2012 for security agencies to be able to monitor some aspects of BlackBerry's users' communications, in particular its messenger service, even as it did not allow access to its enterprise service. Now, I understand that according to a paper put forward by the Internet and Mobile Association of India, India presents a huge opportunity for setting up data centers in terms of large data market that its size will present. It can also, however, become a global data center market. It notes that a minimum regulation and maximum facilitation policy regulatory framework are critical to incentivize location of data centers in the country. The paper has also looked at Malaysia as one of the countries in this case study that could be an example of such minimal regulation. It is very interesting in this regard that the PricewaterhouseCoopers has prepared a study about Malaysia's entry into TPP, and it has projected that the country, with its relaxed policies towards data localization, is well positioned to become a world-class data center. So you have competition. So basically, with all this, the question arises, how should India be positioning itself, even as it is not a member of TPP, but it will influence trade in this field. And of course, as was mentioned earlier, transferring data anywhere these days is so easy. So there are 3 or 4 critical concerns just like to highlight before I conclude. One is obviously the security concern. The second is the privacy concern. The third is that we need to also encourage domestic players to have a role in the e-commerce sector. And finally, we also have to be data friendly to attract business worldwide to come to India. So how do all these 4 we can put together and put a very data friendly but also data secure in that is the question that I wanted to pose. I don't have an answer, but what I wanted to highlight through this brief presentation is to show the importance of this that is coming up in the world. And there was an earlier presentation earlier made by the entrepreneur, and he mentioned regulatory authorities did not have foresight. It is very, very important for us to have that foresight, to be able to foresee, because the intention of the US within this room is to preempt policymakers to be able to regulate that will hurt their companies. It is not, I mean, they are looking after their interests. You have to look after our interests. So how are we able to do that is something that will be very useful to have your guidance on now or even later. But I thought people like you who are in this sector should really look at these issues very carefully. Thank you for your attention.